Well, the short answer on how we should breathe is basically how nature intends us to. Um, what does that mean? Well, I like to look at how, specifically, how the body is designed, how the body is designed to operate, how the body is designed to function. And I believe nature has given us the answers to our questions. Um, and the thing about that is, I think there's, my personal belief is that there's way too much opinion, individual opinion involved in the teaching of singing. I think we can avoid opinion if we look to nature and how the body is designed to work. I don't think there's a lot of confusion over the basic physiology of the breathing and the breath cycle. Most teachers, especially most singers, can recite a fairly accurate description of what exists in the textbooks. The basics of, the diaphragm descends and the lungs inflate, and that draws, the diaphragm descends, changes the air pressure, draws air into the lungs inflate, and such and such. I don't think there's a lot of confusion about that, but where I do think there's confusion is in how the application relates to the act of singing. What I've noticed in a lot of teaching is that when people talk about the breath and breathing, they tend to relate to it from the perspective of quiet respiration. They use examples that relate to sleeping, to sitting quietly. There tends to be an avoidance of exploring the breath behavior of physical activity. For instance, when somebody is running, the breathing is naturally different than it is when you're just sitting there reading a book or you're laying down sleeping. And I think that is at least partly the reason there tends to be a misinterpretation of how the body behaves naturally, and a misinterpretation of how to utilize the body and the breathing specifically to meet the needs of the act of singing. Like I said, nature has the answers. So, but the problem with saying something like that is, what is natural is not usually what comes natural to us. And that is where a lot of times people get confused. When I talk about doing things in a natural manner, the common response is that what comes naturally is usually wrong. So that's where we have to decide, okay, we have to recognize that it's more appropriate to say normal behavior or habitual behavior versus natural behavior. And when I talk about what's natural, it's how nature has designed things to operate. And we can always look at what's the most natural thing. Other animals, not necessarily human behavior, but animal behavior. And that's where we can get some clues about how we should operate. So where this all comes together in the act of singing is to understand what state of being does singing happen. And what I mean is, it refers to what I was talking about in how we breathe when we're sitting quietly versus how we breathe when we're frightened or excited or we're running or we are sleeping. all these are different physical states, which then are reflected in the nature of the breathing. And I think what we need to learn how to do is learn how to access a state of being that will allow the body to function automatically in line with what's needed for the act of singing. So, for instance, one of the most effective that I've found is to explore different emotional states, which then have an equal influence on the physical state, and then utilizing that physical state to breathe correctly, and then subsequently to sing effectively, and to do all the other things that go along with it. Since we're focusing specifically on breathing here, that's what we'll talk about. Breathing is an involuntary act. That's how changing the state can change the nature of the breathing. What happens